John O'Keefe was 46 years old. 46 years old. He spent his life helping people. He's described as a good man, kind, generous, thoughtful. He was a Boston police officer. He worked to help the community. Everything you've heard about this man, he was a good man. He helped people. When his niece and nephew had nobody, he took them in. He took them in. John O'Keefe seemed to be the type of person who would help anybody at any time. And on January 29, 2022, John O'Keefe needed some help. He needed help from somebody else. You see, John O'Keefe had just been hit by Karen Reed in front of 34 Fairview Road, and he lay on the ground dying. And he needed help. Someone to reach out a hand, someone to knock on a door, someone to make a phone call to 911, even anonymously. Not take responsibility, just to help. And there was only one person in this entire planet who could help him that morning, to give him a chance. Maybe it was a 33% chance if he met the Isaac Wolf of the world. But to give him a chance. And that one person who could help him that morning was this defendant right here, Karen Reed. And she made a decision. In her Lexus with the shattered taillight, debris field all over the front yard, and John O'Keefe lying helpless like a child on the front yard, she made a choice. She didn't call 911. She didn't run to his aid. She didn't knock on a door. She made a decision about herself. In her Lexus, she drove away. She was drunk. She hit him, and she left him to die. She was drunk. She hit him, and she left him to die. Before I go through and detail the evidence, let's talk a little bit about the evidence as a whole. She was drunk. She was drinking that night. She was drinking McCarthy's with John. She was drinking at the waterfall. Her blood was taken with samples of a retrograde analysis, almost 2 to 3 times the legal limit. She was drunk. She hit him. The timeline in this case is beyond dispute. You can accuse, assault, characterize, malign, twist. The timeline doesn't change. It is data. Data is data. The black box, the forensics from the SD card, we know exactly step by step where they were. We know in that window she hits him because he never moves again. His healthcare data, the temperature on the battery of the cell phone, the physical evidence, the debris field, the DNA, the hair. And then she left him to die. He had a basal skull fracture, counter coup. You heard all about it when the back of your head hits the ground and the brain comes forward. Dr. Wolf told us the reason why they have level 1 trauma centers around the country is because people can survive this injury if they get help. That's why they have this care. That's why they have these hospitals. But you got to get help. You've got to get help. And if you don't, you develop symptoms, ecchymosis, raccoon eyes, your brain swells, and you die. She was drunk. And that night was a recipe for disaster. But before we get to the drinking, in some ways, the fate of this night was sealed well before that night, because John O'Keefe and Karen Reed were in a toxic relationship. This relationship was crumbling. We hear lovey-dovey, and it was crumbling, and we know it. And we know it because a month before, his niece Kaylee talks about when they went to Aruba. It should have been a wonderful event. It was discord. It was fighting. It was aggravation. And when they got back, the discontent was palpable. Miss Reed reaches out to Brian Higgins, text messaging. John O'Keefe, the relationship is crumbling. And you heard a little bit about what that relationship was like. Kaylee, his niece, told you, when there was an argument, John would do what John does. He would walk away. She described for you one time, to get away from the scene, he walked into his bedroom. But the defendant wouldn't let it go, pounding on his door, having to get the last word, never letting go of the fight. Kind of mirrors what happens on January 29, 2022. And maybe outward appearance, they got along. Maybe sometimes quietly they got along. But behind closed doors, relationships have up and downs. We have a bird's eye view into the relationship on January 28, 2022, because we have the text messages. Not so lovey-dovey. The relationship is almost over. The tensions are simmering beneath the surface. They are not getting along. She believes Mr. Keefe is already halfway out of the relationship and he's not into it anymore. You will read them, you saw them. This relationship was unstable and at its end. And so fast forward that night. That night, after this discord, after the arguing, they go out and what do? They drink. And they drink a lot. So Keefe drinks a lot, and Karen Reed drinks a lot. You've seen the McCarthy videos. You can call it 6, 7, 8, whatever you want to call it. You can see the shots into the mixed drinks. More shots into mixed drinks. Count them yourself. Over a half dozen mixed drinks in just a few hours. Sober? And then at the waterfall, a shot, a mixed drink. Now, it was brought up the waterfall that there was some type of discord between Brian Higgins and John O'Keefe. They knew each other. They were friends. Brian Higgins' conduct of speaking to Karen Reed is not honorable. It's not. But they were friendly. There was no adversarial relationship. There was no anger between them. What we heard is they barely greeted each other. Could we have slide 1, please? At the waterfall bar, when you see John O'Keefe come in, here's him barely greeting him. That's him and Mr. Higgins. Barely greeting each other. Reality sometimes is different than argument. This is a celebratory mood. Take that down, please. Celebratory mood. A bunch of friends. They're playing around. They're hugging. They're grappling. This is a fighting technique for a murder 2 hours later. Is that the story? They're practicing their moves to murder John O'Keefe. In this celebratory mood, you don't see any aggravation or animus between Brian Higgins and John O'Keefe. Inevitably, the next morning, Karen Reed is brought to the hospital and they take her blood. Now, the government doesn't have to prove that she was drunk. It is either that she's over the legal limit, 0.08, or she had enough alcohol to affect her ability to operate a motor vehicle safely, but you will know that she was far beyond the legal limit. After the retrograde analysis, almost 2 to 3 times the legal limit. Almost 2 to 3 times the legal limit. Now, it's been intimated, not come out and said, that maybe she went home and started drinking after she got home. No evidence, mind you, no evidence. And that somehow that is why she had a high blood alcohol level. It's not appropriate for me to comment on the credibility of another attorney's argument, so I won't do that. But Karen Reed will do that for her. So if we listen to slide 2, she'll tell you exactly what she thinks about that claim.
my alcohol intakes, probably about 5 or 6 or 4. The drinks that they were pouring me at McCarthy's, which is where I consumed most of the alcohol, was the weakest at the time. It tasted just like old soda water with lime.
Slide 3, please.
I wouldn't have gotten on the expressway. I wouldn't have gotten on the expressway at 12:15 on January 29th. I mean, it was quiet. The roads were very quiet. You can see it on the videos. And I was going, when I've had a few drinks and I drive, I always drive extra slow. So I know my alerts aren't as sharp as they should be. But I shouldn't have been driving.
Thank you. Do you think she drank when she got home? When they leave the Waterfall Bar at 12:12, you see a video, you have it in evidence, there's a still photo of John O'Keefe holding a glass. Not from the Albert's home. He didn't sneak into the house in the cupboards and grab a glass. From the waterfall, you see him with a glass, and in it is a straw. Take a look at that picture. And now from 12:12 on, we virtually have a historian in the data that tells us exactly where he went, exactly step by step where he went. And how do we have that? Well, we know the defendant's car had like a black box, and Judd Welcher, Dr. Judd Welcher, took the data from the black box and downloaded it so you can see the movements and the triggering events. And then Shannon Burgess, well, you don't like what he says, don't attack the data, attack the man. He can be mocked for his LinkedIn profile or his unupdated CV. But what he did is he found a key, critical piece of this case that did not exist before. He found it recently. And it was that SD card. The SD card that everybody missed, including the defense expert. Everybody missed it. So as much as you want to make fun of him, Shannon Welcher found the key so that we could have the time and date and location coordinated for an impenetrable timeline that can't be broken. That's what Shannon Burgess did. And so we know on the way from the waterfall to 34 Fairview, Ms. Reed is driving, drunk. Mr. O'Keefe is in the passenger side of the car, and they're heading their way to 34 Fairview, and they get lost. And now we have more data because John O'Keefe has a cell phone. And I said it in the beginning, it is a historian. It doesn't suffer from bias, it doesn't suffer from prejudice, it doesn't suffer from memory loss. It has data on it. And he puts on Waze, high location data, as Ian Whiff would say. And it tells you second by second the speed, the location, the movement. That's what it does. And he has healthcare data on that phone. The healthcare data separately shows his movement. And that is critical. It is critical because it not only shows his movement, it shows when he does not move. That healthcare data is critical. And it's not subject to bias. It's not in dispute. There's no other contrary evidence. It is data. On the way to 34 Fairview, alcohol fuels tension. We know that. And we know from those text messages the tension in that relationship. And then there's a trigger. There is a trigger on the way because they're lost. And when John O'Keefe calls Jen McCabe for directions, Jen McCabe says something that triggers what's going to happen next. Could I have slide 4, please?
Very close to the Alberts. In fact, when Jen was navigating John to the Alberts when I was driving, she said it's near Ashley's house. Ashley and John had hooked up prior to John and I dating.
And so as they travel to 34 Fairview, under the duress of this crumbling relationship, fueled by intoxication, we have triggers. Now, we know on their way there, we know from the data, where they went, how they moved, If we look at slide 5, Ian Whiffen showed you a guide. You could enlarge that just a little, please. And it shows you with the healthcare data, it registers as flights climbed, but it doesn't mean someone's climbing upstairs. What it means is there's an elevation, and he breaks down the data, the red, the green, if you could move down, please, Ms. Gilman. And then in the bottom left, that's 34th Fairview. You can see, second by second, the circles of their route, even the three-point turn on Cedar Crest. That's what you see. At that point, they've left the bar. Remember, the battery temperature was 82 degrees. They're now in a car. It's now 77 degrees. Think about how accurate the battery temperature is, that it reflects the difference between being in a bar and being in a car. They take a three-point turn at Cedar Crest. And because of Shannon Burgess and because of Judd Welcher, we have the data, and it's a triggering event. Remember, if there's an acceleration past 30%, it registers data on the car, and that's exactly what happens. There's a three-point turn, and it all lines up with the cell phone after you synchronize the times. It's that simple. It's nothing complicated. There's nothing tricky. There's nothing devious about it. It's data. They do the three-point turn, and you can match the cell phone clock with the Lexus clock, and when you do, you can reconcile the difference. There's been a lot of talk, a lot of argument, a lot of fights. Shannon Burgess says 21 to 29 seconds. Mr. DeSorger comes in. Unfortunately, he wasn't able to actually do anything. He wasn't given the invitation to test the data. He just looked at the report and made criticisms like a Monday morning quarterback. But even he, looking at the data, says, well, it's 3 seconds off or 2 seconds. Same window, same time. We can have all the arguments we want. They're there, they're together. The data matches up perfectly, perfectly. And so they make their way down to 34 Fairview Road. They don't stop. They don't stop at the driveway. They don't stop, and John O'Keefe gets out of the car. They go to the flagpole, and we know for two reasons. One, the data. And secondly, Mr. Nagel and Ms. Mason at Cedar Crest, at that intersection before it goes down to the right, they meet. They let Karen Reed go first. They follow behind in the truck. Now, at this point, Mr. O'Keefe has about 8 more minutes before the beginning of the end of his life. And he's in that car. He's in that car for most of it. Because Ms. Mason and Mr. Nagel don't see anybody get out of the truck. Nobody crosses the lawn. Nobody goes to a garage. Not just because they didn't see it. And they didn't. Not because they didn't see it. Because the healthcare data on the phone shows that John O'Keefe is not moving. The car is stopped at the flagpole. The healthcare data stops. The battery stays at 77 degrees. The data is the data. You can't change it as much as you want to. It's data. And they sit at that flagpole for minutes. It's 12, 24, 33 when they get there. They're there past 12:30. Remember, Ms. Mason and Mr. Nagel said they're there about 5 minutes and then they go. It's not exact, but about 5 minutes, they said. So there's about 2 minutes left for John O'Keefe. And what are they doing in those 2 minutes? What are the last 2 minutes of his life that he can remember that would be open to him? They're arguing. They're arguing. They're arguing. And we know they're arguing because Ms. Reed tells us through first responder Becker. She was sad. Remember, he sees her in the back of the ambulance and he's trying to calm her down? She was sad because her last moments were arguing. They're in an argument. That's why they're not going in the house. But John O'Keefe decides to get out of the car, and we know because the dome light goes on. That's what happens when you open a door. Whether he's bent down, he's standing outside, or on the other side, the dome light is on. And then you see the data. John O'Keefe begins to move. 12:31:56. It's the first time he has moved since they got to the flagpole, and it will be the last time he moves in his life. And he moves to 20 seconds. Ian Whiffen said that the satellites, they move, they reconnect, they pull information. He's no longer on high-frequency data because waves are shut off. Now it's more random. It's low-frequency. We would never suggest, and Mr. Whiffen did not claim, based on location data alone. At that point, you can tell exactly what John O'Keefe is. What he said is it was readings all night. The bullet is always near the flagpole. That doesn't mean he was always near the flagpole. He could have moved. He could have moved in the circles and come back. Location data is consistent with him never leaving the flagpole. But that in itself is not enough. But there's more. There is more. There is the healthcare data. There is the temperature of the cell phone battery. And so he moves for 20 seconds. It turns west. It does not say he walks to the house. That's not what the data says. It doesn't say that he goes straight line and he walks over to the door. In fact, could he even get to the door in 75 feet? Could he get there? Because when the investigator for the defense testified, he measures from the driveway. He never stopped at the driveway. He never measures from the flagpole. He never measures from the flagpole to the garage door. So this fantasy that somehow he walked in the garage, even though there's no evidence, there's no witness, there's no data, 20 seconds of his life, and he moves. And healthcare data registers his steps. It could be pacing. It could be a straight line. It could be shaking the phone. We don't know. We don't know. We don't know everything. We don't know every little detail in every little second. We don't have to. That's not doubt. That's not reasonable doubt. We know for that 20 seconds he's moving. And in that 20-second window, when he moves, he has his phone and he looks down, 12:32:09, he sees a text message from his friend, John McCabe. And he looks at the text message and he closes it. And then it happens. We know from the uncontroverted data from that black box, we know that Karen Reed, after he gets out of the car, drives away. She drives for at least 33 feet away from him. He's back near the flagpole. She's gone. It's over. Whatever argument is over. Whatever anger and flame has been dispassioned, she's moved on. He's separate from her. He's safe. And then she makes a decision. That's what this case is about. Then she makes a decision. She could have driven home. She could have broken up with him. They could have talked about it the next day. Or like knocking on the door, like Kaylee said, getting the last word. She doesn't drive away. She takes that 6,000-pound Lexus and she makes a decision. And the decision is that she steps on the gas after banging it into reverse.